Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I need to write this while it's still fresh, while I can still remember exactly how I felt. My boyfriend and I went camping almost every weekend. We lived just outside Flagstaff, Arizona, and there were dozens of hiking trails within an hour's drive. We weren't extreme outdoor enthusiasts or anything. We were just simple people who needed to get away from our phones, our jobs, and the constant noise of everything. This happened last September. We chose a hiking trail about 13 kilometers inside the Coconino National Forest that we had never experienced before. Online reviews described the trail as perfect, not overly crowded, moderately difficult, and you could camp at the end. We set out early Saturday morning, stopped for coffee and breakfast sandwiches, and arrived. The parking lot at the trailhead was just a dirt spot beside the forest road. When we arrived, there was only one other car there, a dark blue sedan that didn't seem to fit in at all. It was very clean. It was very new. It was the kind of car you'd see in a shopping mall parking lot, not here. I noticed right away that the driver's side door wasn't completely closed. It wasn't fully open, just about 7 to 10 centimeters ajar, enough for the interior light to stay on and drain the battery. "Should we see if someone needs help?" my boyfriend asked. I looked around. No one was there. Trees hugged the road on both sides, and the only sound was the wind rustling through the pines. "Maybe they've already left," I said, but something felt off. I went over and closed the door. The interior was spotless. No trash, no personal belongings, nothing. Just leather seats and the smell of a new car. When I closed the door, it locked automatically. We shouldered our backpacks and set off. The first few hours were just as we had hoped. The road wound upward through ponderosa pines and Douglas firs. Sunlight streamed down in golden rays. We talked about work, maybe getting a dog, unimportant things. The things normal couples talk about. After about 5 miles, we reached a clearing. It was larger than I expected, perhaps 50 meters in diameter, relatively flat. And right in the middle was a tent. It wasn't a big family tent or anything. It was small, bright orange, the kind of dome tent one person would use. The tent had a zippered door. "Hello?" my boyfriend called out. No answer, no movement. We probably stood there for about 30 seconds watching the tent, waiting for someone to open the zipper and stick their head out. But nothing happened. "They've probably gone for a walk," I said, but I didn't really believe it. Who sets up camp and leaves their tent completely closed in the middle of the day? We moved to the farthest corner of the clearing and set up our own tent. I kept looking at the orange tent. I waited for movement. I saw nothing. We ate lunch inside our tent, and it started to drizzle. It was a light rain, nothing serious. We laid out our sleeping bags, organized our things, and rested. My boyfriend fell asleep for a while. I tried to read a book on my phone, but I kept looking at the orange tent through the mesh window. No one came or went. Around 4 in the afternoon, the rain stopped. I opened the zipper of our tent to get some fresh air, and that's when I saw them. 2 men in their 30s were standing about 5 meters away from our tent. They were just standing there. They were looking at us. Actually, my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't heard them approach. Footsteps, voices, nothing. The ground was soft from the rain. I should have heard something, anything. "My God," I said. "You scared me." They didn't apologize. They didn't smile. They didn't react at all to my obvious shock. The one on the left was tall and thin, maybe 6'2", wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt that looked too clean for someone camping. The one on the right was shorter, more muscular, and despite it being a warm afternoon, he was also wearing jeans and a dark hooded sweatshirt. Neither of them had backpacks. Neither had a water bottle. Neither looked like they had been hiking. My boyfriend sat behind me, and I could feel him tense up when he saw them. "Is that your tent?" asked the tall one, pointing to the orange tent in the middle of the clearing. "No," I said. "We thought it was yours." They looked at each other, not quickly or tensely, just slowly, deliberately turning their heads, as if communicating something without words. Then they turned back to us with the same blank stares. "We've been here for 3 days," said the shorter one. His voice was flat, realistic, as if reading from a script. 3 days in a one-person tent, 2 adult men. The math didn't add up, the logic didn't add up. Yet he said it as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Oh," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. That's great. It's a nice place." The tall one tilted his head slightly. "Are you two alone?" The question felt wrong. It wasn't exactly threatening, but it was wrong. It was too direct, too interested. "Our friends will be here later," my boyfriend said quickly. It was a lie, but a good one. "They're a few hours behind us." The shorter one's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile. It was something else. "Good," he said. Just that one word, good. They stood there a little longer, still not smiling. Still just staring at us with those empty stares that made my hair stand on end. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Somehow, not making eye contact would have been dangerous. Then, without saying another word, they turned simultaneously and walked toward the orange tent. Their movements were synchronized, as if rehearsed. It wasn't natural. They didn't go inside the tent. They just sat down next to it, legs crossed, turned their backs to us, and looked towards the trees. My hands trembled slightly as I zipped up our tent. "That was really weird," my boyfriend said quietly. "Yeah." Their story doesn't make sense. 2 men staying in a one-person tent for 3 days, and they have no equipment? I shook my head. I was thinking the same thing. And the way they asked us if we were alone. "We should go," he said. "Should we go?" I thought about it. It was late afternoon, probably close to 5 o'clock. We had walked 5 miles uphill. Packing everything up and walking downhill as darkness fell didn't sound appealing. The trail wasn't well marked in places, and we'd had trouble following it even in daylight. And what would we say if someone asked why we were leaving? 2 guys acting strange? They hadn't threatened us. They hadn't done anything wrong. Actually, let's just observe the situation, I said. If anything else happens, we'll leave immediately, okay? He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded. After that, we tried to act normal. We played cards for a while, but neither of us could really concentrate. We talked quietly about random things, but the conversation kept breaking off. Every few minutes, I looked out the mesh window. The 2 men didn't move at all. Next to the orange tent, they sat completely still, staring into the forest. Once, I could have sworn the tall one turned his head slightly in our direction, but when I looked closer, he was looking the other way again. As the sun began to set behind the trees, the temperature dropped. We put on our jackets. My boyfriend wanted to take out the camp stove and make instant coffee, but I stopped him. "Let's not," I said. "Let's stay quiet." He understood immediately. We ate granola bars and dried fruit mix for dinner. There was no fire, there was no stove, there was no unnecessary noise. The light faded slowly, as it does in the mountains. Long shadows stretched across the clearing. The orange tent darkened in the gloom, no longer bright and visible. And those two men continued to sit there, motionless as statues. I kept watching them until I could no longer see them, until the darkness swallowed everything except the indistinct silhouettes of the trees against the faintly lit sky. "Maybe they're sleeping," my boyfriend whispered. Maybe. But I didn't believe it. The rigid posture they sat in showed they were very much awake. They were very ready. Both of us fully clothed, we lay down on our sleeping bags without taking off our boots, just in case. I kept my phone next to my pillow, flashlight app ready. My boyfriend did the same. When night fell completely, the sounds of the forest changed. The birds stopped singing. The wind died down. And in that silence, every little sound became more pronounced. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch snapped. Leaves rustled, swaying tree branches creaked. I tried to tell myself this was normal. Forests are noisy at night. Animals move, branches settle into place, the wind passes through the pine trees. It was normal, but it didn't feel normal. I don't remember falling asleep. One minute I was lying there tense and awake, listening to every sound, and the next minute my boyfriend was shaking my shoulder, covering my mouth with his hand to wake me up. "Listen," he whispered, so quietly I could barely hear him. I held my breath. Voices, quiet, muffled, coming from outside. I couldn't make out the words, only the low rhythm of the conversation. Two people were whispering, the kind of conversation people have when they don't want to be heard. But the thing was, the voices were coming from behind our tent, not from the direction of the orange tent standing in the clearing. From the forest behind us, from the road, from the campsite, from a place where there was no reason for anyone to be. I don't remember falling asleep. One minute I was lying there tense and awake, the next minute my boyfriend was shaking my shoulder to wake me up. "Listen," he whispered. I held my breath. The sounds, quiet, muffled, and coming from outside. I couldn't make out the words, only the low rhythm of the conversation. Two people were talking, but the thing is, the sounds were coming from behind our tent. Not from the direction of the orange tent, from the forest behind us. My boyfriend took out his phone and tried to find our flashlight using the dim screen light. His hands were shaking so much that it took him 3 tries to turn on the flashlight. "What are we going to do?" I whispered. The sounds stopped. Complete silence. Not even the normal sounds of the forest. No insects. There was no wind. There was nothing. Just a dead, suffocating silence. Then the footsteps began. They weren't trying to be quiet. They weren't trying to hide. Heavy, deliberate footsteps moved through the bushes behind our tent, snapping branches and crushing leaves. With every step, they were getting closer. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it through the mesh window behind our tent. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating tree trunks, ferns, and low branches, creating wild, dancing shadows. There was nothing, no one, but the footsteps continued. Now they were closer. I could hear breathing, heavy, labored breathing like someone who had been running. 3 meters away. 1.5 meters. Then they stopped, right behind our tent. So close that I could have reached out and touched the person standing there, or whatever it was. We sat completely still. I could hear my boyfriend's rapid, shallow breathing next to me. I could hear my own heartbeat ringing in my ears, so loud that I was sure whoever was outside could hear it too. My hand was shaking, causing the light from my phone to sway, making the shadows outside dance and shift. I wanted to say something. I wanted to call out and ask who was there. But my throat was closed with fear, and no sound came out. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing was moving. There were no more footsteps. There was no more breathing. There were no more sounds. There was only silence, darkness, and the distinct feeling, the absolute certainty that something was watching us from the other side of the thin nylon fabric, just a few inches away. My boyfriend grabbed my arm and squeezed it so hard it hurt. When I looked at him, his face was as white as a sheet, his eyes wide open. He said 2 words: "Let's go." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say we were being paranoid, that they were probably just animals, that nothing would happen until morning. But I couldn't, because I didn't believe any of that. Every fiber of my being screamed that we were in danger, that we had to leave, that staying here another second would be a terrible mistake. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's pack up quickly and go." We moved as quickly and quietly as we could, but being quiet didn't make much difference. Whatever or whoever was out there already knew we were here. We stuffed our sleeping bags into our backpacks without rolling them up properly, folded the tent poles with trembling hands, and crammed everything neatly into our backpacks. I kept the light on my phone on, scanning the trees behind us every few seconds. I didn't see anything, but that didn't reassure me. It made me feel even worse, because I knew something was there. I could feel it watching us. We were ready in less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. My boyfriend put on his backpack and opened the tent door. The front door, the one facing the clearing and away from whatever was behind us. I followed him, and that's when I saw them. The 2 men I had seen before. They were standing at the edge of our campsite, maybe 20 meters ahead, at the edge of the trees. They were motionless. They weren't talking. They were just standing there in the dark, watching us. The light from my phone hit them, but they didn't react. They didn't shield their eyes. They didn't blink. They didn't say a word. They just stood there, completely expressionless, their faces looking pale and strange in the harsh LED light, like mannequins, like something inhuman. And I noticed something else, something that froze my blood. They were both wearing the same clothes they had worn before. The tall one wore the same gray t-shirt. The short one wore the same dark hoodie. But the clothes were completely clean. No dirt, no wrinkles, no sign that they had been sitting on the ground for hours or camping for 3 days. "We're leaving," my boyfriend said loudly. His voice cracked on the last word, shattering the silence like glass breaking. The men didn't respond. They didn't move. They seemed to be barely breathing. We started walking toward the road, quickly but not running, our backpacks bouncing strangely on our shoulders. I couldn't help but look back once. The 2 men were still standing there, completely motionless, silhouettes against the dark trees, but I could see their heads slowly turning, following our escape. And then I saw something else. A third figure was emerging from behind a tree near where our tent had been. He was taller than the other 2, completely motionless. I grabbed my boyfriend's arm and started pulling him faster. "Don't look back," I said. "Just keep walking." We reached the trail and started descending, using our phone lights to find the markers. The trail was dangerous in the dark. Roots and rocks seemed to jump at us. Branches grabbed our faces and clothes. But we didn't slow down. We couldn't stop. Behind us, I heard footsteps on the trail. They were following us. They weren't running. They were just walking at a steady, calm pace, as if they knew there was no need to hurry, as if they knew they could catch us whenever they wanted. We went faster, half running, half stumbling down the steep sections. My lungs were burning. My legs ached, but we didn't stop. The footsteps behind us kept pace with us. They never got closer. They never fell behind. They were always there, steady and relentless. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, we came to a bend where the road looped back on itself. I risked a glance back at the section we had just come from. 3 people stood on the road, looking down. They were too far away to see their faces in the darkness. Just 3 motionless silhouettes watching our escape. We kept walking until we reached the parking lot at the start of the trail. In the dark, stumbling over roots and rocks, scraping our hands and faces on branches, using our phone lights until the batteries died, it took us almost 3 hours to descend. We spoke only in brief warnings. Root here, rock, watch out. We just kept going. For the first hour, footsteps followed us. Then they stopped. Or maybe we couldn't hear them anymore because of our own voices as we fled in panic. When we finally saw the parking lot ahead of us, when the trees parted and we saw our car in the dim moonlight, I really started to cry. Relief, exhaustion, and lingering fear washed over me all at once. But then I saw it. The blue sedan was still there. The driver's door was open again. The interior light was on, and it cast a pale yellow glow on the ground. We got into our car, and I immediately locked the doors, pressing the button 3 times to be sure. My hands shaking so much I could barely do it. My boyfriend started the engine, and we sped down the dark forest road, gravel flying, tires skidding around the curves. Neither of us cared, neither of us spoke, until we hit the asphalt. We called the police from a gas station about 20 minutes away. After the darkness of the forest, the fluorescent lights inside were very bright. Everything seemed unreal and wrong. While my boyfriend talked to the operator, I sat on a plastic chair next to the coffee machine, watching him pace back and forth, repeatedly playing with his hair, his nervous habit. The officer who arrived 20 minutes later was a deputy sheriff in his 50s, with tired eyes and a skeptical expression. We told him everything. The strange men, the tent, the feeling of being followed, the footsteps behind our tent. The 3 people we saw on the road. He took notes. He asked questions. Where exactly did this happen? What did the men look like? Did they threaten you? Did they have weapons? No, we said. There were no threats. No weapons. Just something was wrong. Something was very wrong. I could see he was far from believing us. Or maybe he believed us but thought we were panicking for nothing. 2 city slickers scared of the dark woods. I'll send someone to check it out in the morning, he finally said, closing his notebook. Morning. Not now. Not immediately. Morning. That night, we went to a motel. Neither of us wanted to drive home in the dark for an hour. Even though we only needed 1 bed, we got a room with 2 beds, because after sleeping in a tent, lying next to each other in the same bed felt claustrophobic. I couldn't sleep. Lying there, I stared at the ceiling, listened to my boyfriend's breathing, watched the red numbers on the alarm clock change. 2:47, 3:15, 4:03. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 2 men standing at the edge of our campsite. I saw the 3rd figure emerge from behind the tree. I heard the footsteps following us on the road. 3 days later, the deputy sheriff called us back. I was at work when my phone rang, sitting in a meeting about 3-month forecasts or some similarly meaningless topic. I saw his number and stepped out into the hallway. We found the sedan, he said. No preamble. The car belonged to a man named Richard Chen, 62 years old. Your daughter reported him missing 4 days before you got there. My stomach clenched. Missing? Your daughter said her father liked to go camping alone. He was supposed to return 3 days before you got there. Your daughter called him, got worried when he didn't answer, and reported him missing. Did you find him? A pause. No. We found camping gear scattered in the clearing you mentioned. We found the orange tent. We found his car, keys still inside. We didn't find Richard Chen. What about the 2 men we saw? Another pause, this time longer. We didn't find anyone else there. No other campers, no other vehicles. There was no sign that anyone else had been there recently except Mr. Chen. That's not possible, I said. We saw them. We talked to them. They were real. I'm not saying they weren't there. his deputy said carefully. "I'm saying we found no evidence of them. No footprints, no trash, no disturbed soil where they might have sat. Nothing." After hanging up the phone, I stood in the office hallway for a long time, breathing, trying to comprehend what had happened. The deputy sheriff called twice more over the next 2 weeks. He asked more questions. Could we describe the men in more detail? What exactly did they say? What time did we see them? Did we see any other vehicles on the road besides the sedan? We told them everything we could remember, but of course it wasn't enough. How can you explain someone's wrongness? The way they moved in sync, never blinking, looking at you as if you weren't real? They never found Richard Chen. The case was shelved about a month later. His daughter called me once. She must have gotten my number from the police. She wanted to ask if I remembered anything else, any small detail that might help. I told her I was sorry. I told her we saw the tent, we saw the car, but we didn't see him. I didn't mention the 2 men. What was the point? They never found any trace of them. She would think we imagined it. Maybe we panicked for nothing. But I didn't imagine it. I know what I saw. That was 7 months ago. We haven't camped since. In fact, we haven't even mentioned it. Sometimes my boyfriend starts to say something. "Remember when we used to," and then stops. He changes the subject. We don't go to the mountains anymore. We stay in the city with its lights, people, and noise, where you're never truly alone. But sometimes when I can't sleep late at night, I think about those 2 men standing at the edge of our campsite. I think about how they never blinked. I think about how their faces remained completely expressionless even when the light from my phone shone directly on them. How incredibly clean their clothes were. I think about 62-year-old Richard Chen, who went camping alone and never came back. I think about how we heard noises and footsteps behind our tent, but when we left, both men were standing in front of us. This means either they moved incredibly fast and silently through the dark forest to get in front of us, or a third person stayed behind, or there were more than 2 people. And I think about something else, something I haven't told anyone. Not to my boyfriend, not to the deputy sheriff, not even to Richard Chen's daughter. That night, as we were packing up our tent, trying to leave in a hurry, I dropped my phone for a second. The light shone down on the ground, and in that brief moment of illumination, I saw footprints on the soft earth. Lots of them. They were circling around where our tent had been, little circles, as if someone was pacing. While we slept, just inches from our heads, separated only by a thin fabric, they kept turning. I quickly picked up my phone, and the footprints disappeared into the shadows. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was seeing things because I was panicking. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I'm alone, truly alone, like when my boyfriend is working late and the apartment is quiet, I hear footsteps outside my door. Footsteps pacing back and forth in the hallway, drawing circles. When I look through the peephole, there's no one there. But I still hear the footsteps. I used to travel a lot for work. Technology consulting, the kind where you fly to a city, spend 3 days in hotel conference rooms, then fly back. The pay was good, but it wasn't much of a life. You only see airports, nothing else. This happened in Pennsylvania, outside Pittsburgh. I had been sent there to help update the systems of a manufacturing company. The project was supposed to take a week, but we finished early. We got everything done on Thursday afternoon instead of Friday night. My flight home was Saturday morning, so I had a whole day free. I was staying at one of those typical business hotels near the airport. The kind with a sad little gym and a breakfast buffet that's exactly the same whether you're in Pennsylvania, Texas, or Oregon. I'd spent enough time in places like that. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to see trees, the sky, and real things. I found a hiking trail online, about an hour northeast of the city. It was called the Laurel Ridge Trail. According to the reviews, it was moderately difficult, mostly uphill, and offered beautiful views from the top. 12 miles round trip, perfect for spending the whole day. The problem was that I hadn't prepared for hiking at all. I was on a business trip, so I had dress shoes, dress pants, and button-down shirts. I had nothing suitable. I had to stop at a sporting goods store along the way and buy everything. Hiking boots that needed to be broken in, synthetic pants that rustled as I walked, a cheap backpack that dug into my shoulders and hurt. That morning, as I put these things on in my hotel room, I felt like a fake person rather than a real one. It was like wearing a costume, but at least I would be outside. The trip took a little over an hour. The trail started at a small dirt parking lot at the end of a winding road. When I got there, I was relieved to see that the parking lot was empty. There were no other cars. I wasn't in the mood to chat with other hikers. It was a beautiful morning, cool but not cold, probably around 15 degrees. The sun was bright, and the sky was that deep blue you only see in early autumn. I locked my car, checked that I had my phone and water bottle, and set off down the trail. The first hour was great. Everything I wanted was there. The trail wound its way up through a dense forest, mostly of oak and maple trees, the leaves just beginning to turn yellow. Sunlight filtered through the trees. Birds were singing. For a while, a stream ran parallel to the trail, making a pleasant sound as it flowed over rocks. I didn't think about work. I didn't think about tomorrow's flight home or the project waiting for me on Monday. I just walked, breathed, and existed in a way that's hard to do in conference rooms and airports. About 2 hours later, as I rounded a bend, I saw him. A man, leaning his back against a tree, sitting on the ground, maybe 10 meters ahead. His head was bowed, his chin resting on his chest, as if he were sleeping. Despite the warm morning, he had pulled a dark, hooded sweatshirt over his head. Suddenly feeling strange, I slowed down. If he was really asleep, I didn't want to startle him, but I couldn't just stop and wait for him to wake up. The path went right past him. "Hey!" I called out, about 5 meters away. "Excuse me." He slowly lifted his head. Even though the hood shaded his face, I could tell he was looking at me. Actually, he was staring. It wasn't the quick glance you give a stranger passing by. It was a long, steady stare that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I gave him a friendly nod and continued on my way, crossing to the far side of the path as I passed. I gave him space. I was polite. He didn't say anything. He didn't respond. He just watched me pass by with that same fixed stare. After I passed him, I started walking much faster. I don't know why. Something about the way he looked at me didn't feel right. It was too intense, too focused. A few minutes later, I looked back. The path curved away, and I couldn't see him anymore. I told myself to relax. I told myself he was just someone taking a break from his walk. He probably thought it was strange that I was so tense. I kept walking. The path became steeper. My new boots started rubbing my heels. I could feel my feet getting blisters, but I didn't care. Exercising physically, getting tired from moving around instead of sitting in a chair all day, felt good. Around noon, I found a good place to rest. A flat rock right next to the trail, partially visible through the trees. I sat down, drank some water, and ate the protein bar I had brought with me. The forest was quiet except for the wind rustling through the leaves and the occasional sound of birds. After sitting there for about 5 minutes, I heard footsteps on the trail. Someone was coming. They were moving fast, almost running. I stood up, suddenly tense, though I didn't know why. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then he came around the bend. It was the man I had seen before. The man sitting leaning against the tree. He was running down the path, hood still up despite his exhaustion, panting and struggling. He didn't slow down when he saw me. He came straight towards me. I took a step back, my heart suddenly pounding. But he stopped about 1.5 meters away, panting, staring at me with the same intense gaze. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, catching his breath, watching me. Then he reached into the pocket of his hooded jacket. Every muscle in my body tensed. I was already thinking about how I would escape, where I would go, whether I could get past him on the narrow path. But what he pulled out wasn't a gun, it was a wallet. Brown leather, the edges worn. He held it out to me. "I think you dropped this," he said. His voice was flat. There was no emotion. I looked at the wallet, then at him. "This isn't mine." "Yes, it is," he said, still holding out the wallet. "You dropped it there." "I didn't bring my wallet with me," I said, which was true. I'd left it locked in my car. All I had in my pocket was my phone and my car keys. "You must have me confused with someone else." The expression on his face didn't change. "This is your wallet. Take it." The way he said it wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. Take it. I didn't know what to do. My instincts were telling me that something was very wrong here. But did I have a choice? Argue with this stranger in the middle of nowhere? He was standing between me and the way back. And something in his eyes, something cold and empty, made me afraid to refuse. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm sorry. My mistake." I reached out and took the wallet from his hand. Our fingers touched briefly, and his skin was cold. Too cold for someone who had been running uphill. The moment I took the wallet, his whole demeanor changed. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was somehow wrong, too broad, too sharp. "You're welcome," he said. Then he turned and continued walking instead of running, his hands in the pockets of his hooded jacket. Within a minute, he disappeared around another bend. I stood there for a long time, holding this stranger's wallet, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The wallet wasn't as heavy as it should have been. It was lighter. I opened it, already knowing what I would find. There was nothing. It was completely empty. No cards, no cash, no ID, not even the little plastic photo sleeves. Just smooth, empty brown leather, worn smooth by years of use. Why would someone run down the trail to give me an empty wallet? Why insist it was mine when it clearly wasn't? What was the point? I looked at the path he had taken, then looked back at the path I had come. I had probably gone 4 or 5 miles. Halfway to the summit, maybe a little more. I should have continued. I should have finished the hike. But I didn't want to. The forest no longer felt peaceful. Something felt off. And I didn't want to risk encountering that man again further away from the parking lot in a more isolated spot, higher up on the trail. I put the wallet in my backpack and started heading down. The return trip would take about 2 hours. Walking fast, stopping when I needed to catch my breath, I made it in 90 minutes. I kept looking back, sure he was following me, but the trail was empty. By the time I could see the parking lot through the trees, my shirt was soaked with sweat and my feet were screaming in pain from blisters. The sun was low now, it was late afternoon, and long shadows fell across the dirt lot. My car was still the only one there. It was parked facing the start of the path, just as I had left it. I walked towards it, keys already in hand, thinking of getting inside, locking the doors, and getting away from here as soon as possible. That's when I saw the shadow. Long and dark, it stretched out behind my car. A human shadow. Someone crouched or sitting somewhere far away, out of sight. I stopped maybe 20 meters away from my car, maybe more. The shadow didn't move. My mind was racing. It could have been anyone. Another hiker, someone whose car had broken down, a completely innocent person. But I knew that wasn't the case. I knew for sure it was him. He was waiting for me, and I knew that if I walked towards the driver's door as I normally would, he would be there. My keys were in my right pocket. I slowly, quietly slipped my hand into my pocket and wrapped my fingers around the keys. The car had a keyless entry system. I could unlock it from here. I took a breath and headed toward the passenger side, trying to act natural, as if I hadn't seen anything. 3 steps, 4, 5. I pressed the unlock button. The car beeped, and the locks clicked open with a solid sound. Behind the car, I heard a sudden movement. Feet were hitting gravel. Someone was getting up quickly. I grabbed the passenger door handle and pulled it open, threw myself inside, and slammed the door behind me. My fingers found the lock button and pressed it hard. All 4 doors locked with a solid click. A second later, the driver's door handle shook. Someone was trying to open it. I looked, and there he was standing right outside the window. The man from the path. His face was only a few inches from the glass, the same cold stare, the same fake smile. He was saying something. I couldn't hear him through the glass, but I could see his lips moving. He was repeating the same words over and over. "Give me the wallet. Give me the wallet. Give me the wallet." I jumped over the center console to the driver's seat, my heart beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. I inserted the key into the ignition. This was an old rental car, the kind that still required a physical key, and turned it. The engine started. Thank God the engine started. Now he was yanking the door handle, yanking it hard enough to shake the whole car. He was still saying the same words. He was still smiling that terrifying smile. I put the car in reverse and hit the gas, jerking backward. He had to jump out of the way to avoid being hit. In the rearview mirror, I saw him stumble, catch himself, and then start running toward the car. I turned and hit the gas, accelerating on the narrow access road, gravel flying, tires skidding. In the mirror, I saw him standing in the middle of the road, watching me. He didn't follow. He stood there motionless, growing smaller and smaller until I couldn't see him anymore. I didn't slow down until I reached the main highway. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the steering wheel. After driving for another 20 minutes, I saw a small police station in a town called Somerset, pulled into the parking lot, and sat there for a while trying to breathe normally. Finally, I went inside. I told them everything. About the man I saw on the road, the wallet, him waiting by my car. The officer taking my statement was young, in his mid-20s, with a professional sympathy, as if he had rehearsed it beforehand. He asked a lot of questions. What did the man look like? How tall was he? What was he wearing? Did he threaten me directly? Did he have a gun? No, I said, no gun, no direct threat, just wrong. Everything about him was wrong. The officer nodded and wrote everything down. Then he asked to see the wallet. I took it out of my backpack and handed it to him. He examined it carefully, opened it, checked all the empty pockets, looked for anything that might identify the owner. He found nothing. Just as I had. "I'll file this report," he said finally. "But without any identifying information, without an actual crime having been committed, there's not much we can do. He didn't attack you. He didn't rob you. He didn't explicitly threaten you." "He was waiting by my car," I said. "He was hiding." "I understand it's frightening," the officer said. "I'm not dismissing your fears, but legally, we need more than this." I left with a case number and the wallet. The officer said they would keep it as potential evidence, but neither of us knew what evidence it was evidence of. I returned to the hotel in a daze. I didn't want to go out, so I ordered room service for dinner. I didn't want to be around people. I just wanted to lock the door and pretend the whole day had never happened. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. How he looked at me. How he knew I was alone. How he got to the parking lot before me, even though I saw him going up. Unless there was another way. A shortcut I didn't know about. That would explain everything. He knew that way better than I did. He knew a faster way. He got to the parking lot first and waited. That's what I told myself. It was the logical explanation. But it didn't explain the wallet. It didn't explain why he insisted it was mine. It didn't explain that smile. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing outside the car window saying those words. Give me the wallet. Give me the wallet. Around 3 in the morning, still awake, I woke up and turned on all the lights in the room. I took out the wallet I had stuffed into my backpack after the police returned it to me. I had told the police the wallet was completely empty, and it had been before. I was sure of that. But now, when I opened it, there was something inside. A small piece of paper, folded once, was tucked into one of the card slots. My hands were shaking as I took it out and unfolded it. Written in pen, in shaky, desperate-looking handwriting were 4 words, "Don't come back alone." I stared at it for a long time, then I folded it, put it back in the wallet, and threw it all at the bottom of my backpack. The next morning, I left Pennsylvania, got on a plane, went home, went back to work, went back to my stable life, but I kept the wallet. I don't know why. I should have thrown it away, left it in that hotel room, or tossed it in a trash can at the airport. But I didn't. Right now, it's in my closet, in a shoebox with old phone chargers and cables. I haven't opened it in months. I haven't read that note, but sometimes, late at night, I think about it. I wonder who the wallet really belongs to. I wonder what happened to them. I wonder why that man wanted it back so badly. And I think about those 4 words written in that desperate handwriting. Don't come back alone. That means someone did come back. Someone didn't listen to the warning. Sometimes I wonder if I should go back. Should I try to find out what really happened on that trail? Should I try to help the person who wrote that note, if they're still alive? But I won't, because I always hike alone. And now I know what happens when you hike alone. I've been hiking alone for years. My friends always told me I should find a group, that it's safer that way, but I never understood the point. Groups move too slowly. They talk too much. They ruin the whole reason I go there in the first place. The silence. I live outside Asheville, North Carolina, and there are hundreds of trails within an hour's drive. Most weekends I'd pick one, pack my things, and disappear for a day or 2. It was my therapy, my reset button, the only time I felt like myself. This happened last October. The weather was perfect for hiking. Cool mornings, warm afternoons, the leaves just starting to turn. I had found a hiking trail I had never been to before, about 45 minutes northwest. It was called the Timber Creek Loop. It was 18 miles long in total, following an old riverbed up into the mountains, forming a loop, and then descending down a different ridge. According to the description online, this trail was usually completed in 2 days, and there was a good camping spot halfway along the route. But I was in good shape and traveling light. I figured I could finish it in a day and a half if I pushed myself. I could camp one night, finish the trail the next morning, and be back at my car by early afternoon. I left my apartment around 7 on Saturday morning. The parking area was a small gravel lot at the end of the Forest Service Road, the kind of place you'd drive right past if you didn't know it was there. When I arrived, the parking area was empty except for scattered leaves and cracked pavement. Perfect. I locked my car, double-checked my backpack, tent, sleeping bag, water filter, enough food for 2 days, and set off toward the trailhead. The first few hours were exactly as I had hoped. The trail followed Timber Creek through a dense hardwood forest. The water flowed clear over smooth rocks. Sunlight filtered through the treetops in shifting patterns. I saw one deer, just a brown flash disappearing into the brush. I didn't see any other hikers. I wasn't expecting to. This wasn't a popular trail. It was too long, too remote, not scenic enough for Instagram. Just miles of quiet forest and creek water. Just my kind of place. Around noon, maybe 6 or 7 miles in, I encountered a man coming toward me on the trail. He was the first person I'd seen all day. He was in his mid-40s, average height, wearing jeans and a gray t-shirt. No backpack, no water bottle, nothing. We saw each other from maybe 50 meters away. Following standard trail etiquette, we acknowledged each other, maybe nodded, maybe said hello. I prepared my polite hiker smile, but as he got closer, I sensed something was wrong. He wasn't just walking toward me, he was looking at me. Really looking, not just ordinary eye contact. A fixed, intense stare that made my stomach tighten. When we were about 10 feet apart, he stopped walking. I stopped too. I couldn't help it. Part of my brain was telling me to approach him. "Hello," I said, trying to sound normal, friendly. He didn't respond immediately. He just kept staring at me with a blank expression. He didn't smile, he didn't frown, he didn't do anything. Then he said, "Where's your group?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Your group," he repeated. "Where are they?" Suddenly, I realized how alone I was. How far I was from the parking lot. That there was no one else for miles around. "They're coming," I said. The words just came out, a lie for safety. Maybe 10 minutes behind me. He tilted his head slightly as if considering this. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was like watching someone who had learned to smile from a book, but had never felt the emotion behind it. "Good," he said. That was all. Just good. Then he started walking again, passing me on the narrow path. I had to step aside to let him pass. After he passed, I stood there for a moment, listening to his footsteps fading behind me. Then I turned and watched him go, following him with my eyes until he disappeared around the bend. Something was very wrong with him in this interaction, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. It was strange that he had no equipment. You can't walk 11 kilometers on a trail like this without at least water. And those clothes, jeans and a t-shirt. Clean jeans. As if he had just left his house instead of going for a long walk. And that question, where's the group? Why did he assume I had a group? Why did he care? I should have turned back then. I should have gone back to my car. But I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself he was just a strange man out for a daily walk. Maybe a local who knew the way well and traveled light. I kept walking. By afternoon, I was deep in the forest. The road veered away from the river and wound its way through dense poplar and oak trees. The shade of the trees was so thick that the light filtering through the leaves took on a greenish hue. I started looking for a suitable place to camp. The trail guide said there was a flat area about 8 miles off the main trail. I found it around 4 o'clock, a small clearing about 20 feet in diameter, with a fire pit made of stacked stones. People had camped here before. I could see the flat areas where tents had been pitched, the marks in the ground from the stakes, but it looked like no one had used it recently. The fire pit was filled with old leaves, and the ground was undisturbed. I set my backpack down and started gathering tent pegs, planning where to pitch my tent. That's when I heard something. Footsteps. They were coming from the trail behind me. I froze and listened. They were close, maybe 30 meters away. They were steadily approaching the clearing. My first thought was other hikers. Finally, someone else on the trail. But then I remembered I hadn't seen anyone else this morning besides that man. And these footsteps were strange, very deliberate, very regular. I slowly got up and turned back to the trail. He stepped into the clearing. It was the man I'd seen that morning. Same gray t-shirt, same jeans, same blank expression. My heart started racing. "Hey," I said. My voice was higher than normal. "Are you still on the trail?" He didn't answer. He stood at the edge of the clearing and looked at me. He wasn't approaching, but he wasn't leaving either. "I thought you were going down," I said. Still no answer. Just that stare. "Look, buddy, are you okay? Do you need help?" Finally, he spoke. "I'm waiting." "What are you waiting for?" "My group." A chill ran down my spine. "What?" "You said they were 10 minutes behind. That was hours ago." He smiled again. The same wrong, empty smile. "Where are they?" I took a step back. My mind was racing. This man was following me. He had to be. There was no other explanation. He had passed me on the trail this morning, but somehow he was behind me again. How? "They changed their minds," I said. "They turned back. I'll meet them tomorrow." "That's not what you said." "Plans changed." He took a step into the clearing. It was just one step, but it was enough to tense my muscles and get ready to run. "You're alone," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. My hand slowly moved toward my backpack, toward the outer pocket where I kept my knife. It was just a small folding knife, nothing serious, but it was better than nothing. He saw my movement. His eyes followed my hand, then returned to my face. We stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. We stared at each other across the clearing. The forest around us had fallen completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Then he turned and walked back down the path. He didn't say anything. He didn't explain. He just turned and left, disappearing into the trees as he had come. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there, my hand still on my backpack, listening to the silence. Finally, when I was convinced he was really gone, I picked up my backpack and quickly moved away from that clearing. I didn't set up my tent, I didn't camp, I just started walking, quickly, almost running in places. I didn't care about completing the loop anymore. I just wanted to get off this trail. The problem was that I was about halfway through the loop. Returning the way I came would be the same distance as completing the loop. Either way, I had 8 or 9 miles to go. I chose to press on. The trail continued along the ridge, and I figured I'd be safer once I crossed the peak and started descending the other side. Closer to the parking lot, closer to my car. The sun was beginning to set. Perhaps an hour of daylight remained, followed by an hour of twilight before complete darkness fell. Ignoring the burning in my legs and the weight of the backpack on my shoulders, I pushed myself onward. I had gone maybe 2 miles when I heard it. Footsteps behind me. On the road, at the same pace as my footsteps. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. The footsteps started again. I turned and looked at the trail. There was nothing there. No one was visible among the trees, but I could hear breathing. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone who had been running. "I know you're there," I shouted. My voice echoed through the forest and died away. "Leave me alone." There was no answer, just that breathing, steady and rhythmic, maybe 10 or 12 meters behind me. I turned and started running. With a 30-pound backpack on my back, I ran as fast as I could. The path was uneven, and I kept stumbling, tripping over trees, scraping my hands on the bark, but I didn't slow down. The footsteps behind me quickened too. They weren't running. They were just walking faster. steady and unrelenting. I don't know how long I ran, maybe 15 minutes, maybe longer. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like rubber, and my vision was starting to blur. I had to stop. I leaned against a tree, gasping for breath, trying to catch my breath. The footsteps behind me stopped too. I looked back. I still couldn't see anyone. The path curved and descended, and there were too many trees on the road, but I knew he was there. I could feel it. I started walking again, quickly but not running. I was trying to conserve my energy. I was trying to think. The sun was now touching the tops of the trees. It was maybe 30 minutes until dusk. I checked my phone. As expected, there was no signal, but I still had battery. If I needed it, my flashlight app was still there. The road was going downhill. I was now on the backside of the ridge, descending toward the parking lot. According to my map, maybe 5 miles remained. A 2-hour walk, maybe less if I really hurried. I could do it, I just had to keep going. The footsteps continued behind me. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but always there, always matching my pace. The light faded. Twilight turned the forest gray and indistinct. Shadows gathered beneath the trees. I turned on my phone's flashlight and used it to find the trail markers. Small metal diamonds nailed to the trees every 100 meters. The footsteps behind me continued. In the silent twilight, I could now hear them clearly. Steady, patient, never rushing, never falling behind. Now I was truly scared. The kind of fear where your mind screams while your body goes on autopilot. I kept looking back, shining my light on the trail, but I never saw it. There were only trees, shadows, and the narrow dirt path stretching into the darkness. About 2 miles from the parking lot, complete darkness fell. The forest is a completely different world at night. My phone's light created a small field of vision, maybe 3 meters in front of me, and beyond that, there was only darkness. Complete and utter darkness. I could still hear the footsteps. Now they were closer. Maybe 6 meters behind me. I wanted to run again, but I was too exhausted. My legs were shaking. My backpack felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I could barely walk. Then I heard something else. Something new. A whistling sound. Someone behind me was whistling. An unfamiliar melody. Cheerful and melodic, completely out of place with everything else. "What do you want?" I shouted into the darkness. "What the hell do you want from me?" The whistling stopped. Then the voice came from much closer than I expected. "I'm just walking, like you." I turned and shone my light down the path. He was there, maybe 5 meters away, standing in the middle of the path, hands in his pockets, the same blank expression on his face. "Stay away from me," I said. My voice was trembling. "I'm just walking," he repeated. "Then walk somewhere else." He bowed his head. "This is the only path." He was right, we were on a loop. There was only one way forward and one way back, and he was between me and back. "I'm going to the parking lot," I said. "I'm getting in my car and leaving. If you follow me there, I'm calling the police." "Okay," he said simply. I turned and started walking again. Faster now, despite the exhaustion. My phone light bounced crazily as I moved, creating wild shadows. Behind me, the footsteps resumed. But now they were closer. Right behind me. 10 feet, 5 feet. I could hear his breathing. I broke into a run. Didn't care about the pain anymore, didn't care about the darkness or the uneven trail. I just ran, and he ran too. I could hear him right behind me, matching my speed exactly. I saw light ahead, not my phone light, real light. The parking lot lights. They leave them on all night for late hikers. I burst out of the trees and into the parking lot, stumbling across the gravel, fumbling for my keys. My car was right there, right where I'd left it. The only vehicle in the lot. I hit the unlock button. The lights flashed. I grabbed the door handle and threw myself inside, slamming the door and hitting the lock button. I sat there gasping, looking out at the empty parking lot, at the dark tree line where the trail emerged. He didn't follow me out. I waited 5 minutes, 10, 15. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Finally, I started the car and left. I drove too fast down the Forest Service road, not caring about the potholes, just wanting distance between me and that trail. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? A man walked behind me on a public trail? He didn't threaten me, didn't touch me, just walked. I went home, took a long shower, tried to sleep but couldn't. The next morning, I called the ranger station. I told them there was someone acting strange on Timber Creek Loop. The ranger I spoke to was polite but not particularly concerned. "Can you describe him?" she asked. I did. Gray t-shirt, jeans, mid-40s, no gear. "Did he threaten you?" "No, but did he say anything threatening? Make any aggressive moves?" "No." "Okay. Well, we'll make a note of it. But unless there's an actual incident, there's not much we can do. People are allowed to hike." She was right, of course. I knew she was right. But 3 days later, I got a call from a detective with the county sheriff's office. A hiker had been reported missing on Timber Creek Loop. A woman in her 30s. She'd gone out alone Saturday morning, the same day I was there, and never came back. Her car was still in the parking lot. They wanted to know if I'd seen anyone else on the trail. I told them about the man. Every detail I could remember. The detective took careful notes and said they'd investigate. They never found her. They searched for 2 weeks. Dogs, helicopters, ground teams. They found her backpack about 4 miles into the loop, near where I'd stopped to camp. But they never found her. And they never found the man I described either. I think about her sometimes. Wonder if she ran into him too. Wonder what he asked her. Wonder if she was alone. I don't hike solo anymore. And I never finish loops. I always turn around and go back the way I came, even if it's longer. Even if it doesn't make sense. Because I learned something that day on Timber Creek Loop. Some trails don't want you to complete them. And some people aren't just walking. I'm not supposed to talk about this. My supervisor made that very clear after it happened. "Internal investigation," he said. "Don't discuss it with anyone until we know more." But it's been 8 months now. The investigation quietly died. No reports were filed. No one ever mentioned it again. And I can't stop thinking about it. I work for the Forest Service in Oregon, in the Willamette National Forest. It's not glamorous work, mostly trail maintenance, checking camping permits, occasionally helping lost hikers. I've been doing it for 6 years now, and in that time I've seen a lot of weird things. You spend enough time in the deep woods and you realize people use the forest for all kinds of purposes. Illegal grows, mostly. Cannabis farms hidden miles from any trail. Protected by people who really don't want to be found. We find them a few times a year, call it in, let the proper authorities handle it. I learned early on not to go poking around those operations alone. But this wasn't that. This was something else. It happened last September. I was doing a sweep of the eastern quadrant, checking some of the more remote areas we only visit a few times a year. Places so far off the beaten path that most hikers never even know they exist. I'd been out for 2 days already, camping rough, moving through sections of forest that hadn't seen a ranger in months. My assignment was simple. Check for illegal dumping. Look for fire hazards. Make sure no one had set up unauthorized structures. The 3rd day, I was about 12 miles from the nearest forest road, following an old game trail that wasn't on any map, when I smelled smoke. Not wildfire smoke. wood smoke. A campfire. I stopped and checked my GPS. According to our records, there were no established campsites within 5 miles of my position. No trails either. Just dense, old-growth forest that went on for miles in every direction. Someone was out here. Way out here. And they weren't supposed to be. I followed the smell. It got stronger as I pushed through thick underbrush, climbing over fallen logs, ducking under low branches. This wasn't an area anyone would stumble into by accident. You had to work to get here. After about 20 minutes, I started seeing signs. A tree with a small mark carved into it. 3 parallel lines. Then another tree 50 feet later with the same mark. Trail markers, I realized. Someone had marked a path through the woods. I followed the marks. They led me up a small ridge, down into a hollow, then up another slope. The smoke smell was strong now. I could hear something too, a faint metallic clanking sound, irregular and distant. I came over a rise and stopped dead. Below me, in a natural depression in the forest floor, was a camp. Not a campsite. A camp. Semi-permanent, organized, clearly lived in. There were 3 structures made from tarps and scavenged wood. A fire pit with a grill made from an old oven rack. Clotheslines strung between trees with various garments hanging from them. A work table made from logs and a piece of plywood. Stacks of plastic storage bins, the kind you buy at hardware stores, arranged along one side of the clearing. And it was empty. No one there. The fire was burning low, just coals, but recent enough that someone had been tending it within the last few hours. I stood there for a long moment, taking it all in. My first thought was homeless camp. We got those sometimes, people trying to live off the grid, usually closer to roads where they could get supplies. But this was too far out, too organized. My second thought was illegal operation. But there were no plants, no equipment, nothing that suggested drugs or poaching or any other illegal activity I recognized. It was just a camp, like someone had decided to live here, miles from anything. I should have left right then, should have marked the location and called it in, let someone else deal with it. But I didn't. I walked down into the clearing, my boots crunching on dead leaves. The metallic clanking I'd heard earlier had stopped. Everything was quiet except for the soft pop of the dying fire. Up close, the camp was even stranger. Everything was meticulously organized. The storage bins were labeled: food, water, clothes, tools. The work table had items arranged on it with obvious care: a can opener, a hunting knife, a coil of rope, all lined up perfectly parallel. But here's what made my skin crawl. Everything looked new. The tarps weren't weathered. The bins weren't sun-faded. The rope wasn't frayed. Like the camp had been set up recently, maybe within the last few weeks. I walked over to one of the structures. It was bigger than the others, maybe 8 feet by 10, with a tarp roof stretched tight over a wooden frame. The entrance was a flap of plastic that someone had tied back. I looked inside. Sleeping bags, 4 of them, laid out in a row, each with a small personal item placed at the head. A baseball cap, a pair of glasses, a paperback book, a wristwatch, 4 sleeping bags. But I'd only seen clothes for maybe 2 people on the line. I backed away from the structure and looked around the clearing again, really seeing it this time. The fire pit was large, big enough to cook for multiple people. The work table had 4 metal cups sitting on it. 4, but no one was here. I pulled out my radio. This far out, I didn't expect it to work, but I tried anyway. "Dispatch, this is Ranger 47. Do you copy?" Static. Nothing else. I was about to try again when I heard it. Voices. Multiple voices, speaking in low tones, coming from the woods beyond the camp. They were coming back. Every instinct I had screamed at me to hide, to get out of the clearing before whoever lived here found me standing in the middle of their camp. But there was nowhere to go. The clearing was surrounded by dense forest, and I couldn't move quietly enough to disappear before they arrived. So I did the only thing I could think of. I stood in the middle of the clearing next to the fire pit and waited. Official, authoritative. A forest ranger doing his job. 3 people emerged from the trees on the far side of the clearing. 2 men and a woman, all in their 30s or 40s. They were dressed in normal outdoor clothes, jeans, flannel shirts, hiking boots. They were carrying things. The men had bundles of firewood. The woman had what looked like a plastic jug of water. They stopped when they saw me, just stopped at the edge of the clearing, about 30 feet away, and stared. "Afternoon," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm with the Forest Service. Mind if I ask what you're doing out here?" They didn't answer, didn't move, just stood there, looking at me with blank expressions that reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. "This is pretty far from any established camping area," I continued. "And I don't see any permits posted." Still nothing. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was something unusual, something unexpected. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble," I said, "but you can't just set up camp on federal land without—" "We live here," one of the men said. His voice was flat, matter of fact. "You can't live here," I said. "This is national forest. It's not zoned for permanent residents." "We live here," he repeated, exactly the same inflection. The woman set down her water jug. The other man put down his firewood. Slowly, deliberately. Their eyes never left me. I felt my hand move toward my hip, toward the radio I knew wouldn't work, toward the can of bear spray I carried for emergencies. "How many of you are there?" I asked. 4, the woman said. I looked at the sleeping bags I'd seen. 4 bags. 3 people standing in front of me. "Where's the 4th person?" The 3 of them looked at each other. Not quickly. Slowly, turning their heads in unison, like they were synchronized. Then they looked back at me. "Hunting," the woman said. Something was very wrong. The way they stood, the way they spoke, the way they looked at me, it all felt rehearsed, artificial, like watching actors who'd learned their lines but not their motivation. "Hunting what?" I asked. "Food," one of the men said. "With what? I don't see any weapons registered to this area." "We don't need weapons," the woman said. And she smiled. It was the smile that did it, that made the decision for me. Because it was exactly the same smile as the other 2, the exact same expression, the exact same tilt of the head, the exact same slight showing of teeth. Like they'd all practiced it together, like they'd all learned it from the same source. "I'm going to need you to pack up this camp," I said, backing toward the edge of the clearing. "This is federal land and—" "You should stay," the woman interrupted. "It's getting dark soon. Dangerous to travel at night." I looked up. She was right. The sun was lower than I'd realized. Maybe an hour of daylight left. I'd been so focused on the camp I'd lost track of time. "I'll be fine," I said. "Will you?" one of the men asked. I turned and walked out of the clearing. Fast. Not quite running, but close. I could feel them watching me go. I didn't look back. I followed my own trail markers out, using my GPS to navigate, moving as quickly as I could through the darkening forest. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. But I felt watched. The whole way out, I felt eyes on me. It took me almost 3 hours to get back to where I'd camped the night before. Full dark by then. I set up my tent by flashlight, crawled inside, and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every sound made me jump, every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves. I kept seeing that smile, those synchronized movements. 4 sleeping bags, 3 people. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my tent. Not trying to be quiet, just walking in a circle around my tent. Steady, rhythmic steps, round and round. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent door, shining the light out into the darkness. Nothing. No one there. But the footsteps didn't stop. They kept circling. I could hear them clearly, moving through the leaves and underbrush, maybe 10 feet from my tent. I closed the tent and sat there, flashlight in hand, listening to those footsteps circle me for hours. Round and round and round. They didn't stop until dawn. I packed up as soon as there was enough light to see. Didn't eat breakfast. Didn't boil water for coffee. Just stuffed everything in my pack and started hiking out to the nearest forest road. I made it back to the ranger station around noon. My supervisor asked how the patrol went. I told him about the camp, described the location, the structures, the 3 people I'd met. His expression changed while I was talking. Got serious, got concerned. "Show me on the map," he said. I did, marked the exact coordinates from my GPS. He stared at the map for a long time. Then he looked at me. "You're sure about this location?" "Positive." "And there were definitely people there? You saw them?" 3 people. They said there were 4. He picked up his phone and made a call. I couldn't hear who he was talking to or what they said, but the conversation was short. When he hung up, he looked at me again. "You need to write up a full report, everything you saw, everyone you encountered, every detail you can remember." I did, spent the rest of the day writing it all down. Submitted it that evening. 2 days later, my supervisor called me into his office. "There's been an incident," he said. "We sent a team out to investigate that camp you found. They're recommending we pull back and let other agencies handle it." "What other agencies?" "Can't say, but we're being told to drop it. Internal investigation now, you understand?" I didn't, but I nodded anyway. "And you need to not talk about this," he continued. "To anyone. Not other rangers, not friends, not family. It's under investigation and discussing it could compromise things." "What did they find out there?" He hesitated. "More than we expected." That was all he'd say. I've tried to forget about it. Tried to write it off as just another weird thing that happens in the deep woods. Probably drug runners or some off-grid survivalist group. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible. But I can't forget those faces, those synchronized smiles, the way they moved together like they shared one brain, and I can't forget what I found out later, completely by accident. I was filing some old reports a few months ago and came across a missing persons bulletin from 2 years earlier. 4 hikers, all in their 30s, had disappeared in the Willamette National Forest. They'd been camping together, left their campsite one morning for a day hike, and never came back. Their names were listed. Their photos were attached. I recognized them immediately. They were the 3 people I'd met in that camp. All 3 of them. Still wearing the same clothes. Still looking exactly the same. The bulletin was 2 years old, but I'd seen them 3 months ago. And the 4th person, the one who was hunting, their photo was on the bulletin too. I've checked the missing persons database 3 times since then. Those 4 people are still listed as missing, still unsolved, still lost somewhere in the Willamette National Forest. But I know where they are. They're still out there, 12 miles from the nearest road, in a camp that shouldn't exist, living in a way that makes no sense. And sometimes, late at night when I'm home alone, I think about that 4th person, the one who was hunting, the one I never saw. I wonder what they were hunting for. I wonder if they found it. And I wonder if that's what's standing outside my apartment right now, in the darkness beyond my window, watching me write this. Because I can hear footsteps out there, walking in circles, round and round and round. I need to write this down while I still can, while I still remember who I am. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old. I've been a ranger with the U.S. Forest Service for 9 years. I work in the Sierra Nevada range, mostly in the Tahoe National Forest. I have an apartment in Truckee. I have a sister in Sacramento. I have a life outside these woods. I need to keep reminding myself of that. This started as a routine patrol. That's what I keep coming back to. There was nothing special about it. Nothing that should have gone wrong. It was a Tuesday in late October. I was assigned to check the Northern Ridge trails, the ones that close for winter in another few weeks. Standard maintenance inspection. Look for storm damage, check the trail markers, make sure no one had left any unauthorized structures or dumped garbage before the season ended. I'd done the same patrol a dozen times before. I knew every switchback, every landmark, every camping spot. It was supposed to take 2 days. I'd camp at Riley's Point on night 1, finish the loop on day 2, be back at the station by Wednesday evening. Simple, routine, safe. I started early Tuesday morning, around 7. The weather was perfect, clear skies, temperature in the low 50s. That crisp autumn air that makes you glad to be alive. I parked at the northern trailhead, signed the log, and headed out. The first few hours were exactly what I expected. The trail wound up through mixed conifer forest, ponderosa pine, incense cedar, white fir. The morning light came down in golden shafts through the canopy. I saw a black bear about an hour in, a young one, probably getting ready for winter. It looked at me, decided I wasn't interesting, and wandered off into the undergrowth. Normal. Everything was normal. Around noon, I stopped for lunch at Falcon Overlook, a rocky outcropping about 6 miles in that gives you a view of the valley below. I ate my sandwich and checked my radio. Clear signal, good connection back to the station. Ranger 23 checking in, I said. Falcon Overlook, all clear. Copy that, 23, dispatch responded. It was Tom, one of the longtime operators. How's it looking up there? Beautiful. No issues so far. Weather's supposed to hold through tomorrow. Should be smooth sailing. That's the plan. I signed off and kept going. The trail continued up the ridge, climbing gradually through dense forest. I checked trail markers, noted a few spots where erosion was starting to become a problem, made mental notes for the maintenance crew. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. I reached Riley's Point around 4 in the afternoon. It's a flat area about 10 miles into the Ridge Trail, with a clearing big enough for a few tents and a nice view to the west. There's a fire ring that's been there for years, and someone had built a rough log bench that we'd never bothered to remove. I set up my tent, got my camp stove going, made dinner. The sun set around 6, painting the sky orange and purple. I sat on the log bench and watched it, drinking instant coffee, feeling that particular kind of tired satisfaction that comes from a good day of physical work. I crawled into my tent around 8, read for a bit by flashlight, and fell asleep. That's when things changed. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. My phone said 2:47 a.m., but later I'd realized that couldn't be trusted. Nothing could be trusted after that point. I woke because I heard something. A sound that didn't belong. Footsteps. Someone walking around my tent. Slow, deliberate steps, making a circuit around the clearing. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps continued. Not trying to be quiet, not trying to hide, just walking, round and round. "Hello?" I called out. "Who's there?" The footsteps stopped. Silence. Complete and total. Even the normal forest sounds, wind, insects, distant animal calls, had disappeared. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent door, shining the light out into the darkness. Nothing. The clearing was empty. My camp was undisturbed. The fire ring held only cold ashes from where I'd let my cooking fire die earlier. I swept the flashlight around the perimeter of the clearing. Trees. Shadows. Nothing moving. "If someone's out there, this is Forest Service," I called out. "Identify yourself." No answer. I stood there for a long moment, flashlight in hand, listening. The forest was still silent, no wind, no insects, just my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd been dreaming. Maybe a deer had wandered through camp and my half-asleep brain had turned it into footsteps. It happens sometimes. The woods can play tricks on you at night. I went back into my tent, but I didn't sleep. I lay there listening until the sky started to lighten with dawn. When I got up around 6, everything seemed fine. Normal. The morning was cold and crisp. Birds were singing. The forest had come back to life. I made breakfast, broke down camp, and got ready to finish the patrol. The second day would take me along the ridge for another 8 miles, then down a series of switchbacks back to the northern trailhead where my truck was parked. Easy day. Maybe 6 hours of hiking, most of it downhill. I shouldered my pack and started walking. The trail followed the ridgeline, weaving through the trees, occasionally opening up to give views of the valley on either side. I'd hiked this section many times. I knew it well. That's why I noticed when something was wrong. About an hour in, I came to a junction, 2 trails splitting off from the main path. According to my mental map, and according to the trail I'd hiked many times before, the right fork continued along the ridge. The left fork descended into a small valley and eventually connected to a different trail system. But the trail marker at the junction was wrong. It said the right fork descended into the valley. The left fork continued along the ridge. I stopped and stared at it. That wasn't right. That was backwards. The marker had to be vandalized or moved. I checked my GPS. It agreed with my memory. Right fork along the ridge, left fork into the valley. So why did the marker say the opposite? I took the right fork. The one my GPS and my memory both said was correct. The trail continued through the forest. Dense trees, deep shade. The path winding between massive trunks and overexposed roots. Normal Sierra Nevada forest. But something felt off. The trees seemed taller than I remembered. The shade seemed deeper. The path seemed to curve and turn more than it should. I checked my GPS again. According to the satellite, I was exactly where I should be. On the ridge trail heading south, making good time. But it didn't feel right. I kept walking. What else could I do? The GPS said I was on course. I was following the trail. Everything was fine, except it wasn't. After another hour, I should have reached Eagle's Nest, a distinctive rock formation that jutted out from the ridge like a ship's prow. You can see it from miles away. It's a landmark, a turning point. After Eagle's Nest, the trail starts descending. But I didn't reach Eagle's Nest. The trail just kept going, level, through the same dense forest, the same tall trees, the same deep shade. I stopped and checked my GPS again. According to the device, I'd passed Eagle's Nest 15 minutes ago. I was now on the descent section of the trail, but I wasn't descending. The trail was level, and I hadn't seen any rock formation. I looked around. Nothing looked familiar anymore. The trees all looked the same. The trail could have been any trail. There were no distinguishing features, no landmarks I recognized. My heart started beating faster. I pulled out my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger 23. Do you copy?" Static, pure white noise. I tried again. Dispatch Ranger 23 requesting check-in. More static. Then, buried in the noise, something that might have been a voice. Too distorted to understand. Too far away. Tom, if you can hear me, I'm on the Ridge Trail. Something's wrong with the trail markers. Request confirmation of my position. Nothing but static. I turned off the radio to save battery and stood there thinking. I had options. I could keep following the trail. It had to lead somewhere eventually. I could backtrack to the junction and try the other fork. I could cut through the forest and try to reach the ridge's edge, where I'd be able to see the valley and orient myself. I decided to keep going forward. The GPS said I was on the right path, even if it didn't feel that way. And backtracking would cost time. I wanted to get off this mountain before dark. I walked for another 2 hours. The trail never descended, never changed. Just the same level path through the same dense forest. The same tall trees, the same deep shade. I checked my GPS obsessively. It kept telling me I was making progress. Kept showing me moving along the trail, getting closer to the northern trailhead. But nothing around me changed. Finally, around 2 in the afternoon, according to my phone, I stopped. This was wrong. This was impossible. I should have reached the descent by now. Should have seen landmarks. Should have recognized something. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no wind, no insects. Just silence and the sound of my own breathing. I tried the radio again. Dispatch, this is Ranger 23. I'm lost. I need assistance. Static. If anyone can hear this, I'm somewhere on the Northern Ridge Trail. My GPS is malfunctioning. I need help. Static. Then, very faint, beneath the static. Can't help. I press the radio to my ear. Say again, dispatch. Can't help, sorry. Tom, is that you? I can barely hear you. Not Tom, sorry. Can't help, you shouldn't be there. The radio went dead. Not just static. Completely dead. Like the battery had died. Except I'd replaced it the day before, and it should have lasted a week. I was alone. I stood there in that silent forest, trying not to panic. I had training for this. I knew what to do when lost in the wilderness. Stay calm, stay on the trail, make rational decisions. Except I wasn't lost. My GPS said exactly where I was. I was on the trail, I was following procedure. But everything was wrong. I decided to cut through the forest to my left. If I was really on the ridge like my GPS claimed, I should hit the edge within a quarter mile. I'd be able to see the valley, orient myself, figure out what was going on. I stepped off the trail and into the trees. The forest was dense but passable. I pushed through underbrush, climbed over fallen logs, ducked under low branches. The ground sloped slightly downward, which made sense. I was heading toward the edge of the ridge. I walked for what felt like 15 minutes. The trees never thinned. The ridge edge never appeared. Just more forest, more trees, more shade. I checked my GPS. According to the device, I was now a quarter mile off the trail, heading west, exactly as intended. But I should have reached the edge, should have run out of ridge. I kept going. Another 15 minutes, another quarter mile according to the GPS. Still nothing but forest. This wasn't possible. The ridge wasn't this wide. It couldn't be. I'd seen it from below. I'd hiked it before. It was maybe a few hundred yards across at its widest point. But I'd walked half a mile perpendicular to the trail and still hadn't reached the edge. I turned around and headed back toward the trail. Used the GPS to navigate. It said I was going the right direction. I walked for 30 minutes. I never found the trail. According to my GPS, I'd walked past it. Was now on the other side of it, heading toward the opposite edge of the ridge. But I never crossed a trail. Never saw it. It should have been right there, right where the GPS said it was. But there was nothing. Just forest. That's when I really started to panic. I stood in the middle of the woods surrounded by trees that all looked exactly the same, looking at a GPS that said I was somewhere I clearly wasn't, holding a radio that didn't work, and I felt the first real spike of fear. I was lost, truly lost, and I didn't understand how. I tried to think rationally. The GPS was malfunctioning. It had to be. Some kind of satellite glitch, some error in the system. It was giving me bad information. So, ignore the GPS. Use basic navigation. The sun. Where was the sun? I looked up through the canopy. The light was diffuse, filtering down through layers of branches and needles. I couldn't tell where the sun was. Couldn't determine east or west. The moss. Moss grows on the north side of trees. I checked the nearest tree. Moss all around it. No pattern. The slope. Water flows downhill. Find a stream and follow it down. I listened. No water sounds. No streams nearby. I had a compass in my pack. I'd brought it specifically for emergencies like this. I dug it out and held it level. The needle spun slowly, wouldn't settle. Just rotated in lazy circles, never pointing in any particular direction. Malfunctioning. Like the GPS, like the radio, or something else. I put the compass away and tried to think. I had food for another day. I had water filtration. I had a tent and sleeping bag. I wouldn't die out here, not immediately. I could survive for weeks if I had to. But I needed to get back to the trail. Needed to find my way out. I picked a direction at random and started walking. I'd keep going in a straight line, I decided. Eventually, I'd hit something. The trail, the ridge edge, a landmark. Something. I walked for hours. The light began to fade. Dusk was coming, painting the forest in shades of gray and purple. The forest never changed. Same trees, same shade, same silence. I tried marking my path by breaking branches, by scratching marks on tree trunks, by piling rocks. But when I looked back, the marks were gone. The branches had healed. The scratches had vanished. The rocks had scattered. The forest was erasing me. When it got too dark to continue safely, I stopped and set up camp. My hands were shaking as I pitched the tent, not from cold, from fear. I made myself eat some trail mix even though I wasn't hungry. The food tasted like nothing, like I was chewing air. I forced it down anyway, telling myself I needed the calories, needed the energy. I tried the radio again, cycled through every frequency, emergency channels, ranger channels, everything. Dead. All of it. Just static, or worse, that empty silence that happens when equipment isn't just failing, but fundamentally broken. I tried my phone. No signal, which I expected this far into the wilderness. But I still had battery. Still had the flashlight function. Still had the clock, though I was starting to distrust what it told me. The phone said it was 8:47 p.m. But it felt later than that. Felt like midnight, like 3 a.m., like the deepest part of night when nothing good happens. I turned on the voice recorder, started documenting. This is Ranger Sarah Chen, badge number 2847. Date is... I paused, trying to remember. October 23rd, I think. I'm lost on the Northern Ridge Trail. GPS is malfunctioning. Radio is down. I've been walking since approximately 7 a.m. and haven't found any landmarks. The trail markers are wrong or missing. Requesting assistance if anyone finds this recording. I played it back. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from somewhere else. I saved the file and put the phone away. I climbed into my tent and lay there in the darkness, listening. For a long time there was nothing, just silence. The kind of silence that's so complete it becomes its own sound. A pressure in your ears, a ringing in your head. Then, around what my phone said was midnight, I heard them. Footsteps. Walking around my tent. The same slow, deliberate circuit I'd heard the night before. But now I could hear more details. Could hear the weight of each step. Could hear breathing. Slow, steady, measured. Could hear fabric rustling like whoever was out there was wearing heavy clothes. Round and round and round they went. I counted. 27 steps to complete one circuit, then another 27, then another. Perfect consistency, inhuman consistency. "Who's there?" I shouted. "Show yourself!" The footsteps didn't stop. Didn't speed up or slow down. Just continued their steady circuit. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent, shining the light out into the darkness. Nothing. No one. The forest was empty, but the footsteps continued. I could hear them clearly, leaves crunching, twigs snapping, something heavy moving through the undergrowth circling my tent. But my flashlight showed nothing, just trees and darkness. I stood there, shining the light around, listening to footsteps that came from nowhere, and I felt something inside me crack. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. "Who's there?" I shouted. "Show yourself!" The footsteps didn't stop, didn't speed up or slow down, just continued their steady circuit. 27 steps, 27 steps, 27 steps. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent, shining the light out into the darkness. Nothing. No one. The forest was empty. My light swept across tree trunks, underbrush, shadows. But nothing moved. Nothing reflected back at me. But the footsteps continued. I could hear them clearly. Leaves crunching under heavy boots. Twigs snapping. Something heavy moving through the undergrowth circling my tent. But my flashlight showed nothing. Just trees and darkness, and the small circle of illumination that made the surrounding darkness seem even deeper. I stood there, shining the light around, turning in slow circles, trying to match the sound to something visual. But there was nothing. The footsteps came from nowhere, came from the darkness itself. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The footsteps were getting closer, not in distance. They maintained the same circuit, the same 27 steps, but closer in some other way, like they were approaching from a different dimension, from some other place that occupied the same space but existed separately. I could feel them getting nearer, could feel presence getting stronger, could feel something looking at me even though I saw nothing. I stood there with my flashlight frozen, listening to those impossible footsteps circle me in the darkness, and I felt something inside me crack. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. I was a rational person, trained in wilderness survival, trained in navigation and emergency procedures. I didn't believe in ghosts or monsters or supernatural things, but I couldn't explain this, couldn't rationalize it away. The footsteps continued until dawn. I stood there the entire time, flashlight on, watching nothing, listening to everything. When the first gray light appeared in the sky, real dawn or some simulation of it, I couldn't tell anymore. The footsteps stopped. One moment they were there, circling, constant and relentless. The next moment, silence. Complete and absolute silence. I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. I sat in my tent with my flashlight on, listening, waiting for them to come back, waiting for sunrise to be complete. When there was enough light to see clearly, I packed up immediately. My hands were shaking. My movements were jerky and uncoordinated. I'd been standing all night and my legs felt like rubber. But I had to move, had to keep going. Staying in one place felt dangerous in a way I couldn't articulate. I didn't care about navigation anymore, didn't care about the GPS or the compass or any of it. I just started walking, picked a direction, the direction the early morning light seemed brightest, and walked. The second day was worse than the first. The forest seemed to actively resist my progress. Logs appeared in my path that I swear weren't there a moment before. Underbrush became thicker, more tangled. The ground became uneven, full of hidden roots and holes that tried to twist my ankles. And the trees were wrong. I'd spent 9 years working in these forests. I knew the local species, knew how they grew, how they were distributed, what was normal. But these trees weren't following those patterns anymore. I'd see the same distinctive tree, a ponderosa with a double trunk, or a cedar with the unusual twisted branch, over and over. Not similar trees, the exact same tree. Like I was walking in circles even though my path felt straight. I tried marking my route more deliberately, used my knife to carve deep blazes into tree trunks, crude arrows pointing the direction I'd come from. When I looked back 10 minutes later, the blazes were gone. The trees were smooth and unmarked, as if I'd never touched them. I stopped trying to mark my path after that. Around midday, or what felt like midday, the sun was impossible to locate precisely through the canopy. I found a stream. This was good. This was something. Streams meant water, meant I could refill my bottles, meant I could follow it downhill and eventually reach a river or a lake or some landmark I recognized. The water was clear and cold. I filled my bottles, added purification tablets even though the water looked clean. Basic procedure. I decided to follow the stream downhill. That was the smart move. Water always flows down. Follow it long enough and you reach civilization. I walked beside the stream for hours. It burbled over rocks, wound between trees, created small pools and miniature waterfalls. Normal stream behavior. Except it wasn't going downhill. I'd been following it for 3 hours, and the stream was flowing level. Sometimes it even seemed to flow slightly uphill, which was impossible. Water doesn't flow uphill, but this water did. I stopped and knelt beside it, watching the current. It definitely flowed in one direction. I could see leaves and small debris being carried along, but that direction wasn't down. I stood up and looked back the way I'd come. The stream stretched behind me, winding through the trees, apparently flowing from where I was toward where I'd been. But that meant I turned and looked ahead. The stream continued on, flowing in the same direction I'd been walking. It was a loop. The stream was flowing in a circle, a perfect circle, feeding into itself. Impossible, but there it was. I left the stream and struck out perpendicular to it, heading away from the water, away from the impossible circular current. That night, I camped again. The footsteps came again. Circled all night. Disappeared at dawn. I was starting to understand the pattern, or starting to accept that there was a pattern, even if I didn't understand it. Days here, if they were days, followed rules. Walk during daylight. Camp when dark comes. Listen to footsteps at night. Wake up and walk again. That was the pattern. That was the existence now. Day 3, or what I thought was day 3, I found the tree. It was enormous. A sequoia, which was wrong because sequoias didn't grow in this part of the Sierra Nevada. But there it was, massive and ancient, its trunk so wide that 10 people couldn't have joined hands around it. And carved into the bark, about 6 feet up, were words. Not real. Don't believe it. Keep walking. The letters were old, weathered, carved deep into the living wood. They'd been there for years, maybe decades. I touched the words with trembling fingers. Someone else had been here. Someone else had walked this forest. Someone else had experienced this impossibility. And they'd left a message. Keep walking, that's what it said. Keep walking. I looked around the base of the tree, found more carvings lower down, covered in moss and lichen. Sarah was here. My name. My actual name. Carved into a tree I'd never seen before, in a place I'd never been. No, that was impossible. I hadn't carved that. I'd never been to this tree before. I searched for more carvings, found them all around the trunk. Dozens of them, hundreds, all names, all different, but every fifth or sixth one was mine. Sarah Chen, S. Chen, Sarah, October 2023. Different handwriting, different depths, different ages of carving, but all my name. I backed away from the tree, heart pounding. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. I was hallucinating, had to be. Dehydration, exhaustion, some kind of mental breakdown. But the carvings looked real, felt real when I touched them. I turned and ran, didn't care about direction anymore, just ran, crashing through underbrush, stumbling over logs, branches whipping at my face. I ran until I couldn't breathe, until my lungs burned and my legs gave out and I collapsed against a tree. When I looked up, I saw it, the same tree, the same enormous sequoia, the same carvings. I hadn't run in a circle. I'd run in a straight line. I was sure of it, but I was back at the tree. I stood up slowly and walked away. Carefully, this time. Deliberately. Keeping the tree behind me, walking in what I was certain was a straight line. After 10 minutes, I looked up. The tree was in front of me. I tried again. Different direction. Same result. The tree was always ahead of me, always waiting. I finally gave up and sat down at its base, leaned against the massive trunk, read the carvings over and over. One stood out, recent, the wood still fresh and light-colored. If you're reading this, you're already gone. The only way out is through. Don't stop walking. Don't forget who you are. I pulled out my knife and added my own message below all the others. Sarah Chen, Ranger, 23, October 2023. Still alive. Then I stood up and kept walking. Day 4, Day 5, Day 6. Or maybe it was all the same day, repeating. Maybe I was walking the same path over and over, experiencing it fresh each time, forgetting I'd been here before. My food ran out. I didn't remember eating it all, but my pack was empty. The granola bars were gone, the jerky was gone, the trail mix was gone. I should have been hungry, should have been weak with hunger, but I felt nothing. No hunger, no thirst, just the need to keep walking. My water ran out too, all 3 bottles empty. When had I drunk it? I couldn't remember drinking, but I kept walking, because that's what the pattern required. Walk during the day. Camp at night. Listen to footsteps. Walk again. Day 7. Day 8. Day 9. I stopped counting. Time had stopped making sense anyway. My phone still worked, still showed dates and times, but they were meaningless. It said I'd been walking for 3 days, but it felt like months. It said it was October 24th, then October 23rd again, then October 25th, then back to October 23rd. The calendar was broken, or time was broken, or I was broken. I stopped looking at the phone. I kept walking because walking was all there was. The forest was infinite. The ridge was infinite. I would walk forever through trees that never ended. And eventually I would forget why I was walking at all. My training told me this was impossible. Told me the forest had limits, had edges, had boundaries. Told me I'd been hiking the Sierra Nevada for 9 years and knew every trail, every ridge, every valley. But my experience told me different. Told me I was somewhere else now. somewhere that looked like the forest but wasn't, somewhere that followed different rules, somewhere between. I tried to count, tried to keep track. I'd left on a Tuesday. Tuesday was day 1, Wednesday was day 2, Thursday was day 3, but my phone said it was Thursday and I'd been walking for what felt like weeks. I stopped looking at the phone. I kept walking. I had to keep walking. If I stopped, if I gave up, I'd die out here. I'd become another missing person, another mystery, another ranger who went out on a routine patrol and never came back. I thought about my sister, about my apartment, about my life outside these woods. I said my name out loud every morning. I'm Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old. I'm a forest ranger. I have a sister in Sacramento. I have an apartment in Truckee. I exist. I'm real. I had to keep reminding myself, because the longer I walked through this forest that never changed, the more I started to forget. Details slipped away, faces became fuzzy, memories seemed distant and dreamlike. Was my sister named Karen or Catherine? I couldn't remember. Was my apartment on Elk Street or Elm Street? How old was I? 34 or 35? Every day I forgot a little more. The footsteps at night were constant now, always circling, always the same pattern. I stopped acknowledging them, stopped looking. They were just part of the routine, part of this new existence. Walk during the day, listen to footsteps at night. Wake up and walk again. I ran out of food, didn't matter. I wasn't hungry anymore. I ran out of water, didn't matter. I wasn't thirsty, my phone battery died. Didn't matter. Time didn't mean anything here. I kept walking because walking was all there was. The forest was infinite. The ridge was infinite. I would walk forever through trees that never ended, and eventually I would forget why I was walking at all. Then, on what might have been day 20 or day 50 or day 2, I couldn't remember anymore, couldn't trust my own memory. I saw something different. A building right there in the middle of the forest where no building should be. A small cabin made of weathered logs with a stone chimney and a front porch with 2 rocking chairs. It shouldn't be there. I knew these woods, knew every structure, every ranger station, every historical building. There was nothing like this on the ridge, nothing within 20 miles, but there it was. Solid and real, sitting in a small clearing I was certain hadn't existed a moment before. I stopped and stared at it. It looked old, really old. The logs were gray with age. The chinking between them was crumbling. The windows were covered in decades of grime, but smoke was coming from the chimney. A thin curl of gray smoke rising straight up into the still air. Someone was inside. Someone was living here. I stood at the edge of the clearing for a long time, just looking at the cabin, trying to decide what to do. Every instinct told me to walk away, told me this was wrong, this was dangerous, this was a trap of some kind. But I was so tired, so lost, so desperate for anything different, anything that might provide answers or help or just basic human contact. And more than that, I was forgetting. I knew my name was Sarah. Sarah something. Sarah C. something. But the rest was getting fuzzy. The details were slipping away like water through my fingers. I needed to remember. Needed something to anchor me to reality. And maybe whoever was in that cabin could help. I walked across the clearing. My footsteps seemed too loud in the stillness. Each boot fall on the dry leaves echoed like thunder. The cabin got larger as I approached, in a way that didn't make geometric sense. It should have grown gradually. Instead, it seemed to jump from small to large, from distant to close, like frames were missing from a film. I climbed the 3 steps to the porch. The wood creaked under my weight, but it felt solid. Real. More real than anything had felt in days. I could hear something inside. Movement. A chair scraping against a wooden floor. Footsteps. The same footsteps that circled my tent every night. I knew I shouldn't open the door. Knew it with absolute certainty. Some deep, primal part of my brain was screaming at me to run, to get away, to flee back into the forest. But I couldn't. I was trapped in the pattern now. The pattern required me to enter the cabin. That's what came next. The door opened before I could touch the handle. A woman stood there. Maybe 60 years old, maybe 80, hard to tell. Gray hair pulled back in a bun, deep lines around her eyes and mouth, wearing clothes that looked decades out of date. A long skirt, a button-up blouse, heavy wool cardigan despite the moderate temperature. She looked at me with eyes that held too much knowledge, too much sadness. "You found it," she said. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't spoken in years. "Found what?" My own voice sounded strange to me, hoarse and dry. The place between, the nowhere place, the fold in the woods where lost things end up. I stared at her. "I don't understand. I'm lost. I'm trying to get back to the trail, back to the northern trailhead. I need help. I need to contact my station." She shook her head slowly. "There is no trail anymore. Not for you. Not once you've walked this far. That doesn't make sense. I'm a ranger. I know these woods. I just need to find my way back." "You can't go back," she said. "There is no back. Only forward. Only deeper. Only further into the between." She stepped aside, gesturing into the cabin. "Come in. You should come in. You'll need to rest before you walk again." "Why?" I asked. "Why should I come in?" "Because you can't walk anymore. Not yet. You've been walking for months. Your body is exhausted. Your mind is fracturing. You need to stop, need to understand, and then you need to decide. Decide what? Whether to keep walking or whether to stay." I looked past her into the cabin. It was small, one room, with a wood stove in the corner providing warmth and light. A table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed against one wall, and the walls were covered in names. Carved names, scratched names, written in pencil and pen and charcoal and what looked like dried blood. Hundreds of names, maybe thousands, covering every inch of wall space, overlapping each other, creating layers of text that went back decades. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The last stop," she said. "The place we all end up before the final choice." I stepped into the cabin. It was warmer inside, and the warmth felt wrong. Felt like it was coming from somewhere other than the wood stove. Like the cabin itself was generating heat. I walked to the nearest wall and looked at the names. Some were recent, the wood still light where they'd been carved. Others were so old they were barely visible, worn smooth by time or maybe by the cabin itself. I saw names I recognized, other rangers, hikers who'd gone missing over the years, people I'd been part of search parties for, people we'd never found. "We all end up here eventually," the woman said behind me. "Everyone who gets caught by the ridge, everyone who takes that first wrong step, who camps in the wrong place, who hears the footsteps and doesn't run. It takes us one by one, pulls us in, keeps us walking until we forget who we are. And then, when there's nothing left but the walking, when we're finally empty enough, we find this place." "This isn't real," I said, still staring at the names. My voice was shaking now. "This can't be real. I'm hallucinating. Dehydration, exhaustion. This is my brain breaking down." "Is it?" she asked. "Or is this the only real thing left? Maybe the forest is the hallucination. Maybe the walking is the dream. Maybe this cabin, this moment, this choice, maybe this is the truth." I turned to face her. What choice? She walked to the table and sat down in one of the chairs, gestured for me to take the other. I sat. The chair felt solid under me, more solid than anything had felt in days, or months, or however long I'd been walking. "The ridge takes people," she said. "Has been taking people for longer than anyone remembers, maybe forever. It's hungry for us, for our steps, our presence, our existence. And once it has us, once we cross some invisible line, we can't escape. We walk forever, or until we end up here. And then we choose. We can stay here, in the cabin, safe and warm and real. Or we can keep walking, keep trying to find the way out, keep fighting. What happens if I stay?" She looked at the wood stove. The fire inside burned steady and bright, but I hadn't seen her add any wood to it. "You become part of the cabin," she said quietly. "Part of the between place. You exist here forever, waiting for the next lost soul to arrive. It's not bad, it's not painful. You just are. You exist in this moment, in this room, safe from the walking, safe from the footsteps. And if I keep walking, then you keep walking, through the infinite forest, through the impossible geography, deeper and deeper into the between. And eventually, if you're strong enough, if you hold on to who you are, you might break through, might find the edge, might wake up. Wake up where?" She met my eyes. "In a hospital, probably, if they found you, if they got to you in time, if your body is still alive out there in the real world." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, if my body is still alive?" "Your body collapsed on the trail," she said. Her voice was gentle now, almost kind. "Not long after Riley's Point. You made it through that first night, the night with the footsteps. But the next day, when you started walking, something broke. Heat stroke, maybe, or a stroke, or an aneurysm. Something in your brain. Your body fell. Your physical form is lying on the trail somewhere, has been lying there since that second day." "No," I said. "No, I've been walking. I've been moving. I've covered miles." "Your mind has been walking," she corrected. "Your consciousness, your soul, if you believe in such things. The part of you that thinks and feels and exists, that part is still walking, trapped in the between, trapped in the fold. But your body," she shook her head. "Your body stopped a long time ago." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. "You're lying. This is some kind of trick. You're trying to make me give up." "Why would I do that?" she asked. "What would I gain? I'm trapped here same as you. Have been for 37 years. 37. I couldn't finish the sentence. "I was a hiker," she said. 1986. Before you were born. I came to these mountains alone. Wanted solitude. Wanted to find myself." She laughed bitterly. "I found myself, all right. Found myself walking forever. Just like you. Until I ended up here. Until I made my choice. You chose to stay. I chose to exist," she said. "Instead of fading, instead of walking until there was nothing left of me but motion. I chose this cabin, this moment, this half-life." She stood up. "But you don't have to make the same choice. You're stronger than I was. You've held on to your name longer. You still remember pieces of who you are." "Sarah," I said. "Sarah Chen. I'm 34. I'm a ranger. I have a sister." "What's your sister's name?" I opened my mouth to answer, closed it again. Opened it, tried to remember. Nothing. The name was gone. I could see her face, vaguely, but the name was missing. "You're forgetting," the woman said. "The longer you stay here, the more you forget. That's how the between works. It consumes you slowly, replaces your memories with walking, replaces your identity with motion. Then I'll keep walking, I said. I'll find my way out. I'll break through. Maybe, she said. Or maybe you'll walk until you forget everything, until you're nothing but a ghost moving through the trees, until you're part of the forest itself. She walked to the door and opened it. Beyond, I could see the clearing, the trees, the endless forest. But if you want to try, she said, if you want to keep fighting, then you need to know the rules. You need to understand what you're walking through. Tell me. She pointed to the forest. The between is a maze, a trap. It feeds on time and memory and identity. The more you walk, the more it takes. But there are edges, thin places where the between touches reality. If you can find one of those places, if you can push through, you might wake up, might find yourself back in your body. How do I find them? You walk, you don't stop, you don't sleep. You don't let the footsteps catch you. The footsteps are the between itself, trying to make you part of it. If they catch you, if you let them get close enough, they'll consume you completely. You'll become part of the pattern, part of the walking. What are they? I asked. The footsteps. What's making them? She smiled sadly. Us. All of us. Everyone who's ever been lost here. We become the footsteps eventually. We become the sound that circles the tents, that follows the paths, that drives new victims deeper into the between. It's the cycle, the pattern, the way the between perpetuates itself. That's horrible. That's existence here, she said. But you can avoid it. You can keep walking. Keep holding on to your name, your identity, yourself. And eventually, if you're strong enough, you'll find an edge, a crack, a way through. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was cold. Too cold. Keep walking, Sarah Chen, she said. Don't stop. Don't rest. Don't sleep. Don't let the footsteps catch you. Walk until you can't walk anymore. And then keep walking anyway. Eventually, if you're strong enough, if you hold on to who you are, you might break through, might find the edge, might wake up. And if I don't, then you'll end up back here, at this cabin, and you'll make the same choice I did, to stay or to fade. I pulled my hand away from hers and stepped out onto the porch, looked out at the forest that surrounded the cabin, that went on forever in all directions. How will I know if I'm getting close? I asked. To an edge, to reality. You'll know, she said. The forest will start to thin. The trees will become less dense. The ground will become familiar. You'll see signs of the real world, trail markers that are actually real, sounds that make sense, light that comes from an actual sun, instead of this gray half-light that exists here. I looked up. She was right. The light in the between was wrong. It came from everywhere and nowhere, diffuse and directionless, not real sunlight at all. One more thing, she said. The between doesn't want you to leave. The closer you get to an edge, the harder it will fight. It will show you things, memories that aren't real, paths that lead nowhere, people who don't exist. Don't trust anything. Don't believe anything. Just walk. Just keep moving forward. I nodded and started to leave. Sarah, she called after me. I turned back. When you wake up, if you wake up, you'll still hear them sometimes, the footsteps. They'll follow you back to reality. Not physically, but in your mind, in your dreams. The between doesn't let go completely. It marks you, changes you. You'll always be part of it now, even if you escape. I'll take that risk, I said. And I walked back into the forest. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Then I walked. I said my name, over and over. I'm Sarah Chen. I'm 34 years old. I'm a forest ranger. I have a sister named Karen. I have an apartment on Elk Street in Truckee. I exist. I'm real. I'm alive. The footsteps came at night, closer than ever. I didn't stop. Kept walking in the darkness, using my dead phone as a weight in my pocket to remind me that the real world existed. I walked for days, for weeks, for months. Time meant nothing. But I held on to my name, held on to the details, forced myself to remember. And then, one morning, or one night, or one afternoon, I couldn't tell anymore, I saw light. Real light, sunlight, not filtered through trees but open and bright and real. I walked toward it. The forest started to thin. The trees became less dense. The ground became familiar. I saw the trail, the real trail, solid and worn and exactly where it should be. I saw Riley's Point, saw my tent, still set up from 6 months ago, surrounded by search markers and caution tape. I saw people, rangers, search and rescue, a helicopter in the clearing. I tried to call out, but no sound came. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. And then everything went white. I woke up in a hospital, tubes in my arms, machines beeping. Karen sitting in a chair beside my bed, her head down, asleep. The doctor said I'd been in a coma for 6 months. They'd found me collapsed on the trail, dehydrated and hypothermic. They didn't know why I'd collapsed, didn't know what had happened, but I'd survived. I'm back now, back in my apartment, back in my life. But sometimes, late at night, I hear them. Footsteps outside my window, walking in circles, round and round and round. And I know the ridge isn't done with me. It never lets go completely. It's waiting for me to come back. And someday, I will. We all do. That's the thing about the in-between. You can leave, but it never lets you forget.